the brands that seem to be the ones with the highest momentum in terms of brand value growth over-index on difference.
Hi, I'm Neil Perkin, the host of Think with Google Firestarters, and Firestarters is a series of insightful conversations with the interested and interesting of the advertising, marketing and innovation communities. And today I'm fortunate enough to be speaking with Dom Boyd. So Dom is the Managing Director, UK Insights and Marketing Effectiveness at Practice at Kantar. So Dom, welcome to Firestarters, and I'm going to dive straight in and ask, what is your provocation for the Firestarters audience today?
I think it's something along the lines of effectiveness has never been more important for businesses and for brands, but we seem to have more difficulty than ever in actually doing it in practice.
So let me dive straight into that, because that's a really nice provocation around the effectiveness of advertising and campaigns. Why do you think it is that actually we've got a bit of a disconnect going on at the moment?
Well, I mean, there's quite a few reasons. What's really clear is that marketing spends have been remarkably resilient over the course of the pandemic and beyond that, and that's great. And we're seeing budgets shift more towards digital, and there's all kinds of studies which are showing that, not least ISBA. But at the same time, our data is showing that those marketeers have less confidence than ever in their marketing mix and their effectiveness mix, and that's declined by 7 percentage points over the last year. So essentially there's a confidence gap that's existing in the marketing community. They're spending more, but they're less confident about how they're spending it and what they're doing, and that's an interesting tension, because arguably we've never had more knowledge and scientific base of knowledge about what are the key levers of effectiveness, in particular balancing the long and short, the importance of mental availability and salience. But at the same time, we've seen an explosion in media and fragmentation of media, a blizzard of intermediary metrics, and changes in consumer behaviors as well, especially over the last 12 months with the cost of living crisis. And all of these, I think, have combined in a bit of a perfect storm to where people are rethinking what they're doing and realizing they need to do certain things differently, but they're not quite sure which things to do differently. And they understand the importance of brand in theory, but doing that in practice is sometimes proving a bit harder, especially as there are changes in the media landscape as well. I think there are big questions about, for example, how do you use digital in particular to build your brand? And we're definitely seeing more budgets flow away from TV and towards digital, whether that's because it's faster and flexible, or whether that's because it's seen as a new brand building channel, or whether it's the retrenchment to short-term performance is, I think, something that's a bit open to debate. I think it could be a bit of any one of those. So a bit of a perfect storm, really.
Yeah, interesting. And I've seen you talk before now about, I think you described it as building a culture of effectiveness muscle, which is a really nice way of putting it. But you talked about a sort of 3-stage approach to effectiveness. And I'd love to go into that a bit more. So could you tell us a bit more about this sort of 3 stages really of thinking about effectiveness?
Yeah, I think in some ways we're in a bit of an effectiveness crossroads, if you like, where there is this more learning, but at the same time there are a degree of confusion, and there are some warning signs as well. And certainly what a number of commentators have picked up on is that often we're still doing the wrong things in the wrong way, using the wrong approaches. So I think a really simple way of tackling that is to kind of think about the 3 stages of getting your foundations right, sort of a bit early approach, if you like, in terms of the strategic cycle, and then thinking about how the middle stage, which is making sure you're on track to getting where you need to get to. And then finally, the final stages around outcomes and making sure you're understanding whether or not you're getting where you wanted to, and getting a real world sense of how you're doing that or not.
So if you think about the, let's say the first stage of that, as you describe it there, which is about getting the foundations right, I guess.
Yeah.
What do you think is happening here? Because there's some interesting things going on about, how brands can set themselves up for success, about the relationship between creativity and effectiveness, for example. So what do you think is happening there?
Diplomatically, I'd call it a bit of a mixed picture. So on the one hand, you've got some quite controversial data, really. So, for example, Oxford Side Business School has done a meta-analysis of over 800 independent studies looking at the sales elasticity of campaigns based on a 1% change in ad volume. And what that shows is that since the mid-80s, the sales elasticity has halved. So campaigns are half as effective as they used to be. And that sort of correlates pretty well with Peter Field's analysis of the IPA data bank, looking at the changes in big business effects of campaigns. And I think that a similar sort of time frame, he looks at over 25 years, that showed a similar sort of decline. So basically, campaigns are on some level enjoyed less, or seem to be enjoyed less, and it seems like overall their impact is less than it used to be. Now that's offset a little bit by more recent analysis, both by Peter and by Kantar, and by the ARC database of Grace Kite, which shows, the last 2 years, last 2 or 3 years, an uptick in the commercial effects of campaigns, in particular through optimizing digital, and that's great. But ultimately, I think there's a bit of a problem in that it seems like campaigns still aren't really having the cultural impact that they used to have. Why does this matter? Well, creative, certainly Kantar's analysis shows that creative quality is the #1 factor on marketing profitability after brand size. It's also the #1 driver of saliency or cut through, which is much more so than the media reach or frequency, for example. And it also, our latest analysis, where we've joined up the link database, Kantar's link database, with the walk effect, sort of best of over 1,000 effectiveness case studies, shows that the campaigns with the strongest creative quality, so i.e. the top performers in link, create 4 times the ROMI, or 4 times the return on marketing investment and profitability. So, creativity really is the biggest lever that you can pull on driving not just your sales, but your profitability, your commercial impact. And marketeers still underestimate it. So it's we see it as the #1 factor after brand size, actually, in terms of driving profit. But marketeers think it's the 4th biggest. So actually, people are just underestimating the simple secret source of the power of well-applied creativity.
Is it a case of perhaps marketers being more conservative, or do you think the version of creativity that we have is wrong, or what's actually causing that effect?
I think on one hand, we've sort of entered an era of big data. That happened a while ago. And the problem with data is that people are confusing data with quantification. And one of the unhappy side effects is that perhaps because we've got more analytics, people think that they understand people more, but actually the opposite is true. And one of the side effects of that shift, if mindset, if you like, is that perhaps people have fallen out of love with some of the more classic methodologies for getting insight, which are the cornerstones of getting to great creative briefs. In particular, qualitative research. It doesn't have to be focus groups. It could be ethnographic. It could be any kind of qualitative. But the idea of talking to real people in the flesh, or digitally or otherwise, and observing them, and is as important as the meta picture. Why that's important is that we've seen that when sort of qualitative insight is used at an early stage, it doubles the chances of being in the top quartile of effectiveness on link. So it's a really simple thing. Like when you talk to real people, and get real qualitative stronger foundational insights, it leads to stronger provocations which you can and truths which you can infuse creativity with. So I think that's one thing, is it really, but if you want to stack the odds in your favor, do that. The other thing which I think is related to this is that campaigns are just less funny than they used to be. And certainly, again, from our link database, we're seeing that the amount of ads with no humor has been over the last 20 plus years, has increased by basically about 30%. The ads that are seen as funny has been going in the opposite direction and has been declining. So, and humor, why is that important? Because humor is the #1 factor that drives emotional engagement. And we know that emotions are really important in making campaigns famous. I mean, a lot of the work that Les Binet has done sort of shows that. All the work that we've done shows that. So, again, if you want to stack the odds in your favor, you should be using a degree of humor and lightheartedness. It's not the only tool in the toolbox, but it's arguably the most powerful one. And it's just something that people aren't doing as much, anything like as much.
Do you think we've disconnected really creativity from effectiveness to the detriment of of marketing?
I think we've been going through a bit of a tough patch, if you like. We've taken our eye off the ball collectively, possibly for the right reasons. We've wanted to be more innovative and more purposeful, and those are both valid endeavors, but perhaps we've forgotten what I'd call the fundamentals, and the fundamentals are around the unchanging human brain, our unchanging hardwiring, and the unchanging nature of the importance of things like reach. And so there's a danger that we've tried to be too niche and too innovative, if you like, in some areas without the scale of impact, and we've tried to be more purposeful, but maybe that it's hard to be entertaining in the same way when you are purposeful. It's not impossible, but there is a bit of a tension there. And certainly, the data shows, both our data and other data shows, for example, if you take Cannes winners as a small selection of creative highlights, if you like, over the last 15 years or so, they've become less good at the fundamentals. They've got less humor than they used to have. They've become more polarizing than they were, and they're less good at branding than they once were. Now, last year saw a bit of an improvement, and hopefully this year again we'll see a bit of an improvement. But if you look at it longitudinally, campaigns, award-winning campaigns, aren't quite as good as they used to be. And actually, if you look at the efficiency and effectiveness measures of the award-winning work out there, it's not as good as it used to be, unfortunately. Now, there could be a different, all kinds of reasons in that for that, but those are sort of the objective facts, if you like, certainly based on the data that we've got.
So just picking up on that building brand piece, and I think your sort of middle stage of your kind of 3 stages of effectiveness is really about that, isn't it? It's about sort of differentiation and effective brand building, building brands that are meaningfully different. So talk to me about what the issue might be there.
The role of communications don't exist in isolation. They exist in order to build a brand. Now, communications are just one way of building brands. They're a very powerful way of building them, but they are only just one way. We did some work, we presented at Cannes last year, actually, called the DNA of Breakthrough Brands. And at the heart of that, what we were looking under the covers of our engine, if you like, our brand valuation engine called Brand Z. And what we did is a really simple analysis, just looking at the fastest risers. And we wanted to understand who are the brands that are winning and why, and are they any different? And what we found, so there's tens of thousands of brands and across multiple categories in this analysis. It's a global analysis. Found a really simple thing. There are 3 core drivers to the Brand Z framework: meaningful, difference, and saliency. So it incorporates the Ehrenberg-Bass work on mental availability, if you like. But what we found was something a little bit surprising, which is for brands that are growing fastest, over-indexed on difference. Now, it's not to sort of say that saliency and relevance or meaningfulness are not important. They are. That's why they're part of a foundation engine, if you like. But for brands that seem to be the ones with the highest momentum in terms of brand value growth, over-index on difference. Essentially, you get to a place where any brand can be a breakthrough brand. But what that means is over-indexing on difference. Difference is that seems to be the thing that makes the difference. And what's interesting about that is that brands that are higher in difference are able to command a higher price premium. In fact, meaningful difference accounts for 90% of price power, where saliency accounts for just 6%. So what we can see is saliency and mental availability is really important for driving volume and sales volume, but that's only a bit of the story. It's an important bit of a story, but it's only a bit of a story. Actually, the other bit of a story is about how you drive your price power. And obviously, this is really relevant right now in the cost of living crisis and recessionary times in some markets as well, because it's all about how do you push through those, how do you use your brands to sustain a price advantage. The reason that's important is because a 1% well, McKinsey shows that a 1% increase in price translates to an 8% increase in EBITDA and profitability, and that's 3 times the impact of an equivalent increase in sales volume. So basically, when you push your prices through, it flows right through to the bottom line. So I think there's a story here about how we've underappreciated the role that difference it can play alongside mental availability. And in particular, as a result of that, it's really important because it helps. It's the number one factor in driving your price power, your ability to command a margin. And the reason that's important is because it's a huge weapon in your marketing arsenal. It means we've underappreciated the impact of price in delivering brand value, and therefore we've underappreciated the value of brands as value multipliers. And in simple terms, I think what CEOs are suddenly seeing in the last 6 to 9 months is that they've been able to, for strong brands, they've been able to push through bigger price increases than they thought they might be able to, and they've suddenly realized actually this brand thing is really important, isn't it? It's really helping us weather the storm of tough times. And perhaps it sort of highlights we've forgotten the importance of that price plays and the role that difference plays in delivering that. And it's worth pointing out that difference isn't just about creating real difference, differential advantage, although that helps. It's about perceived difference. So it's a combination of uniqueness, being seen to be unique, and also being seen to lead the way. And that sort of together, that sort of seems to create a shorthand for a quality queue, if you like, and therefore something you would pay just a little bit more for at certain buying points. So ultimately, it's about creating value in the boardroom and value to shareholders, and not just about value that you measure through the amount of likes you're getting or your engagement with social media or something. It's the real stuff which is fueling the Unilevers, the Diageos, and many other companies in terms of their stock, their better than expected commercial performances over the last 12 months.
Yeah, and I guess that's fascinating. I think the next question for me really is about perhaps have we over-focused on efficiency at the expense of effectiveness, perhaps, which I guess relates to that kind of third stage of effectiveness you have, which is about the outcomes that you're aiming for, the real world outcomes. Do you think that's the case?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's something we've all been grappling with for a little while. I mean, there's definitely thinking about, before getting to the efficiency and effectiveness equation, there's definitely something that we're also seeing in our Kantar database, thinking about really that connected red thread about how a brand shows up in popular culture in a more connected way, and some of the things that can help manage the tension between effectiveness and efficiency is having a strong red thread where you've got a clarity which shines through from your brand strategy to your innovation, to your communications, to your experience, and to your sustainability and sort of agenda and whatnot. We're definitely sort of seeing the import from our cross-media database. The importance of synergistic effects has doubled over the last 8 years or so, and we're still seeing, to your efficiency point, that again, with a study we did with Oxford Side Business Schools, the largest analysis ever done of the kind, it sort of showed that the average campaign can be more than 2.5 times more effective in driving brand equity outcomes with a different allocation of media spend. So it sort of shows that there's a degree of misunderstanding and misattribution and wastage in terms of the ability to navigate, to be more effective and more efficient. It doesn't have to be an either or. The importance of being coherent and consistent in a world which is fragmenting, right? That's what that really highlights. Is there are lots of opportunities for brands to still maximize efficiency without sacrificing effectiveness, but to do so they've got to connect better. They've got to have that foundational insight we talked about in the early stage, but they've got to be cohesively activated and have consistency, a much stronger thread of consistency, because the winners are the ones that are going to be the ones that show up differently but in a consistent way. I think what we're sort of seeing is that there are new approaches and new tools for identifying in a very short-term, agile, dynamic way the signals that drive long-term brand impact. Not just through digital content, although that can be included, but in terms of all kinds of signals which provide your team with the ability to optimize in flight, to better manage portfolios, and to better get a better holistic understanding of the true effect of a campaign. The shortcut to all of this is that econometrics shows a truer picture of real campaign effectiveness, because it's less sensitized to last click attribution, if you like. Econometrics is really a brilliant tool for measuring price power, and the great news is that econometrics is becoming much less black box than it used to be. It's really becoming a very inclusive thing, and where it's very dynamic. Certainly our own econometrics at Kantar incorporates AI. It includes our link database. And what we're discovering is that clients love that because it allows them to get a holistic picture of the real levers of campaign effectiveness in flight in a very dynamic way. So it's not just something you launch and leave, and then 6 months or 12 months later you come back to it. It's something you can do, month on month, quarter by quarter. And we can complement that with some sort of other methodologies which allow you to look at campaigns in flight and optimize media mixes. I think this is really exciting because it's taking marketing out of the and econometrics actually out of some of the dusty drawer and into the boardroom, because you can really involve very senior stakeholders in some of the strategic decisions you're making as a business, in terms of where you're investing, how you're investing, and what the actual returns are of the decisions you're making, both in your campaigns, but also in terms of your CX, in terms of your sustainability, in terms of your media mix, and all sorts of other things as well. So these tools are very powerful, and I think they allow marketing to get out of the marketing ghetto and into the veins of the rest of the business, really. And I think that's an exciting time for all of us.
Do you think marketers and their agencies should be braver? Do you think they should be more bold and more challenging in their approaches to advertising?
Bravery can often be equated with originality, and originality can often be equated to doing new things and old things in new ways. And there is a role for that, but I think if I try and stay true to the evidence of what I see in front of me, right? My background is as a creative strategist. I've loved designing new campaigns, and sort of working with the power of creativity. And I'm a huge believer. Obviously, we talked about the importance of creative quality is the #1 driver of profitability. At the same time, I can see a lot of people doing the wrong things in the wrong way, using the wrong metrics, and there is great power in just, I guess Bill Bernbach would have called it, sort of the unchanging human instinct, and focusing harder on getting the fundamentals more right than we are, and doing so with better rigor and greater instinct as well, and greater consistency. I'm a great believer in long-term platforms with long-term ideas that are consistently expressed using consistent assets, whether that's a meerkat or a Cadbury's glass and a half full, or Vollspringdurk technique, or Tesco's every little helps. There's a lot of evidence that shows the long-running marketing vehicles, if you like, and campaign vehicles that are refreshed, but consistently refreshed, are the ones that seem to outperform the others. So I think for me, there are probably a couple of simple things to focus on, really, in what we've talked about today, that can really help you succeed as a business. One of which is go beyond mental and physical availability. It's about, I would call it differentiate or die, because that has a really important role in driving price power and long-term preference. So don't forget about mental availability, but complement it. And secondly, I would say focus on the quality of your connected creativity. Have a really strong insight which transforms, is a foundational brief for a foundational long-term platform for your brand, and then apply it brilliantly in creativity and connect it up. And then finally, I would just sort of say, put in place that culture of effectiveness program, and it's making sure you understand where you really are on the Connect effectiveness maturity curve, making sure you've got a balanced scorecard, which incorporates both the long and the short, and make sure you can turn insight into action. And this is really where the businesses that are really on fire and propelling themselves forwards, they've got the right incentives that are linked to the right metrics. I think it was Drucker that talked about what gets measured gets managed. But if a team is being incentivized only on shorter term performance metrics rather than meaningful difference or longer term brand metrics, then there's going to be a disconnect. And what you want to do is do both of those. You want to connect the long and short, but make sure your operating system of effectiveness inside the business is aligned with your ambition for your brand and for your marketing and for your overall, and that marketing is aligned with the overall ambition for the business.
Dom, that's been so insightful. So unfortunately we're out of time, but thank you so much for being part of Firestarters. And if you're listening or watching, don't forget to subscribe and to share, of course. But my thanks to Dom Boyd for being part of Firestarters. Thank you, Dom.